Chapter 1. The Inheritance Nobody Wanted. The last mourners had barely disappeared beyond the cemetery gates when silence settled over the old family estate like a heavy winter fog. Rain still clung to the windows, and the scent of damp earth lingered on everyone's clothes. Their father's absence felt impossible, yet the conversation inside the lawyer's office shifted with unsettling speed from grief to inheritance. His three sons exchanged impatient glances, already calculating what would soon belong to them. Their sister, Clara, sat quietly, clutching the handkerchief her father had carried every Sunday, unable to imagine replacing love with property. The lawyer unfolded the will, his measured voice filling the room. The farmhouse, fertile fields, savings, machinery, and livestock passed to the brothers in carefully divided shares. Then came the final line. Clara inherited the abandoned windmill standing alone beyond the northern hill. A stunned silence lasted only a heartbeat before laughter erupted. Her eldest brother leaned back with a satisfied grin, calling it nothing more than a collapsing monument to wasted timber. Another joked that at least she would never worry about noisy neighbors. Their youngest brother quickly produced documents filled with legal language, insisting the arrangement was perfectly fair and encouraging her to sign before unnecessary disputes delayed everyone's future. Still numb with sorrow, Clara signed. As the brothers celebrated their fortunes, she looked through the rain-speckled window toward the distant silhouette of the weathered windmill. A memory surfaced with startling clarity. On the night before he died, her father had stood staring at those aging sails. He had reached for her trembling hand, unable to finish whatever he wanted to say, but his eyes had never left the lonely structure. For the first time that day, Clara wondered if everyone else had inherited the wealth while she had unknowingly inherited the secret. Chapter 2. A Place Frozen in Time. The following morning, Clara drove along the narrow dirt road that wound through forgotten fields until the windmill emerged against the gray horizon. Up close, it looked even older than she remembered. Its weathered wooden sails stood motionless, their faded paint peeling beneath years of relentless wind and rain. Tall weeds swallowed the stone pathway, while tangled vines climbed the walls as though nature itself had been patiently reclaiming the place. She unlocked the heavy oak door with the rusted key the lawyer had handed her. The hinges groaned in protest, releasing the stale scent of dust, aged timber, and cold stone that had been trapped inside for decades. Sunlight slipped through cracked boards, revealing drifting particles that shimmered like tiny ghosts suspended in the still air. Every corner spoke of abandonment. Massive wooden gears sat frozen beneath thick blankets of dust. Broken beams leaned dangerously across the floor. Empty grain sacks had long since rotted away, leaving only faded scraps scattered among shattered tools. It seemed impossible that anyone had stepped inside for years. Yet the deeper she wandered, the stranger everything became. Several iron gears gleamed beneath the dust, polished, as though someone had cleaned them not long ago. The central drive shaft showed almost no rust despite the surrounding decay. Along one circular stone wall, she discovered intricate carvings hidden beneath creeping moss, symbols unlike anything she had ever seen on a working mill. Then she noticed the walls. They were unusually thick, far thicker than any ordinary windmill required. Curious, she tapped the stone. In one section, the echo sounded strangely hollow. At the rear of the building stood an old iron staircase spiraling upward before ending abruptly against a solid wooden platform with no visible doorway beyond it. It looked unfinished, almost deliberately misleading. As Clara traced her fingers across the freshly oiled handrail, her heart skipped. The oil couldn't have survived untouched for decades. Someone had maintained parts of this forgotten place. And judging by the careful workmanship, that someone had almost certainly been her father. Chapter 3. The Father's Impossible Habit. Clara spent the next several hours clearing away decades of neglect, sweeping shattered glass, stacking broken boards, and brushing thick layers of dust from the enormous wooden gears. Every movement stirred echoes through the silent windmill, as though the building itself were slowly waking from a long sleep. Despite the hard work, she felt strangely comforted. Her father had always believed that restoring forgotten things revealed stories no one expected to hear. As she pulled an old crate away from the largest gear assembly, something slipped onto the floor with a dull thud. It was a worn leather notebook, its edges faded and its pages stained by age. She recognized it instantly. Her father never went anywhere without that notebook tucked into the pocket of his work coat. With trembling hands, she opened it. The first pages appeared ordinary enough, listing dates, weather conditions, and maintenance tasks stretching back more than 30 years. But as she turned each page, the entries became increasingly puzzling. Instead of recording repairs, her father had begun writing the same mysterious phrases over and over. The wind remembers. Never trust easy wealth. Wait for the rightful heir. Some lines were circled repeatedly, while others were underlined so deeply the ink had nearly pierced the paper. There were rough sketches of gears, measurements that seemed incomplete, and arrows pointing toward locations that were never identified. It felt less like a maintenance log and more like instructions disguised as routine notes. Then she noticed something unsettling. Several pages had been carefully torn out. Not ripped in anger, but removed with deliberate precision. Someone had wanted those pages to disappear without drawing attention. Clara searched the floor, the shelves, even the empty crates nearby, hoping the missing pieces had simply fallen free over time. She found nothing. Closing the notebook, she looked around the silent windmill with new eyes. If someone had erased part of her father's message, what had been so important that they were willing to rewrite history to keep it hidden? Chapter 4. Someone doesn't want her there. Days turned into a steady rhythm of hard work. Every morning, Clara arrived before sunrise with fresh determination, repairing loose boards, clearing tangled vines, and breathing life into a place everyone else had abandoned. The windmill no longer felt like an unwanted inheritance. It felt like a promise she had yet to understand. Then the strange incidents began. The hammer she had left on a windowsill vanished without a trace. A toolbox she always locked was found open the next morning, its contents scattered across the floor. One evening, she carefully secured the heavy oak door before driving home. At dawn, it stood wide open, swaying gently as though someone had walked away only moments earlier. She told herself there had to be a simple explanation. That illusion shattered after a night of heavy rain. Fresh, muddy footprints stretched across the clean stone floor, leading toward the center of the windmill before disappearing completely. There were no tracks leading back outside. As she struggled to make sense of them, another shock awaited her. 2 upper windows had been smashed during the night, scattering broken glass across the aging machinery. Nothing valuable appeared stolen, yet someone had clearly wanted her to know they had been inside. Before she could recover, her eldest brother unexpectedly arrived. The same man who had mocked the windmill at the inheritance meeting now smiled politely and offered to buy it on the spot. The amount he named was astonishing, far beyond what the crumbling structure could possibly be worth. When Clara refused, his pleasant expression faded for just an instant before he warned that maintaining the old building would eventually ruin her. She watched him drive away, unease settling deep inside her. For years, her brothers had dismissed the windmill as useless. Now, one of them was willing to pay generously to take it back. The building hadn't changed. Only their interest had. Someone knew exactly what this forgotten place might be hiding, and they were becoming increasingly desperate to reach it first. Chapter 5. The Hidden Engineering. Determined not to be intimidated, Clara returned to the windmill with renewed resolve. If someone wanted her to abandon the place, she would do exactly the opposite. She climbed onto the aging framework surrounding the massive wooden gears and began replacing cracked supports that threatened to collapse beneath their own weight. Every bolt she tightened seemed to uncover another piece of the windmill's forgotten past. As she carefully brushed decades of grime from the largest drive wheel, her fingers struck smooth metal hidden behind the weathered timber. Curious, she cleared away more dust until an intricate network of polished iron cogs emerged from the shadows. Unlike the crude machinery surrounding it, these gears were crafted with astonishing precision. Their teeth meshed perfectly, showing almost no signs of wear despite their incredible age. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't ordinary mill machinery. It looked more like the inner workings of a giant clock, built by someone with remarkable engineering skill far beyond what such a rural windmill should possess. Remembering the strange sketches inside her father's notebook, Clara hurried to compare them with the hidden mechanism. Every measurement aligned perfectly. The mysterious arrows pointed towards specific gear combinations, while cryptic numbers matched tiny markings engraved into the concealed cogs. Taking a careful breath, she followed the sequence exactly as her father had recorded. One by one, she rotated the exposed gears until the windmill's sails caught a steady gust outside. A deep metallic click echoed through the building. The concealed shaft buried beneath the main drive wheel shuddered for the first time in generations. Dust rained from the ceiling as ancient machinery groaned awake, sending faint vibrations through the thick stone walls. Somewhere below her feet, unseen gears slowly turned before falling silent once more. Clara stood frozen, staring at the mechanism with widening eyes. Her father hadn't been maintaining an old windmill. He had been protecting a machine designed to hide something far greater, and she had only just awakened its first secret. Chapter 6. The Stranger Who Knows the History. For several days after the hidden mechanism moved, Clara could not escape the feeling that the windmill was quietly waiting for her to discover the truth. She studied her father's notes late into the night, comparing every symbol and measurement, but the missing pages left gaps she could not fill. Then, on a cold afternoon, an unfamiliar vehicle stopped outside the windmill. An elderly man stepped out carrying a worn leather case and a collection of old photographs. He introduced himself as Thomas Vale, a historian who had spent decades researching forgotten structures built across the region. He explained that word of Clara's restoration had reached him, and something about the descriptions of the windmill had caught his attention. The moment he saw the carvings along the stone walls, his expression changed. He carefully traced one of the symbols with his fingertips, almost as if greeting an old memory. "These markings aren't decorations," he whispered. "They're instructions." Thomas explained that centuries earlier, master builders used hidden symbols and complex mechanical designs to protect valuable items during periods of war and political unrest. Wealthy families would create secret chambers disguised as ordinary structures, ensuring their treasures survived even if their homes were destroyed. Clara listened in disbelief as he revealed the possibility that her family's windmill had never been a simple agricultural building. It had been designed as a vault, a secret buried beneath layers of wood, stone, and forgotten generations. But before Thomas could explain what he believed was hidden inside, a loud crash interrupted their conversation. They rushed outside to find his vehicle damaged. The windows were shattered, the tires had been cut, and a warning had been scratched into the side panel. "Stay away." Clara felt the cold wind against her face as she stared at those words. This was no longer about an old family inheritance. Someone was willing to destroy property, threaten strangers, and silence anyone who came close to the truth. And now she knew something important. The secret inside the windmill was valuable enough for someone to fear being discovered. Chapter 7. The brothers begin their attack. The warning outside Thomas's damaged vehicle was only the beginning. Within days, Clara received a letter from a law firm representing her brothers. The carefully written document claimed the inheritance had been improperly divided and demanded a complete review of their father's final wishes. They argued that the windmill's true value had been hidden from them and suggested Clara had somehow influenced their father before his death. The accusations felt like another betrayal. After losing their father, she had expected grief to bring them closer. Instead, her brothers had turned their sorrow into suspicion. They were no longer the family members she once trusted. They were determined opponents willing to challenge her in court to take back the one thing they had previously called worthless. Her youngest brother even appeared on local news, describing the situation as a misunderstanding and portraying himself as someone simply seeking fairness. Clara watched the interview in disbelief. The man who laughed when she inherited the windmill was now claiming it was the most important part of their father's estate. But the legal battle was only one threat. That same night, Clara stayed late inside the windmill reviewing her father's notebook with Thomas. A sudden sound echoed from below. A wooden floorboard creaked. Then another. Someone was inside. They turned off the lights and remained completely silent as footsteps moved through the darkness beneath them. Whoever entered wasn't searching randomly. They moved directly toward the hidden machinery. After several tense minutes, the intruder disappeared before they could identify them. Clara stood in the quiet aftermath, staring at the ancient gears surrounding her. The windmill was no longer just a forgotten family property. It was a battlefield. Her brothers wanted control of it. Strangers wanted its secrets. And someone was willing to break in under the cover of darkness to reach whatever her father had spent decades protecting. For the first time, Clara understood the true meaning behind his final warning. The windmill was never something she had inherited. It was something she had been chosen to protect. Chapter 8. The Final Mechanism. The storm arrived 3 nights later. Clara stood inside the windmill as powerful gusts battered the old wooden sails, forcing them to move with a rhythm they had not followed in decades. In her hands was her father's notebook, open to the final remaining pages she had managed to decode. The missing pieces had always bothered her, but now she understood why. Her father had not written instructions for someone searching for treasure. He had written them for someone patient enough to understand the wind itself. Every symbol had a purpose. Every measurement had a meaning. Every strange phrase had been a clue. The wind remembers. Clara whispered the words as she adjusted the final gear into position. Thomas watched from across the room, holding his breath as the ancient machinery waited for the exact moment it had been designed for. Outside, the sails turned faster, creating a deep vibration that traveled through the entire structure. Then it happened. A sound unlike anything Clara had heard before echoed beneath the floor. Stone shifted. Dust poured from the ceiling. The massive wooden gears began moving in perfect synchronization, revealing a hidden system buried behind the visible machinery. Sections of the stone wall slowly separated, sliding apart with incredible precision despite centuries of silence. Behind them was darkness. Not an empty space. A passage. Clara stepped closer as a narrow staircase emerged from beneath the center of the windmill floor. Each iron step appeared one after another, descending into a hidden chamber that had remained untouched for generations. The air rising from below was cold and ancient, carrying the scent of sealed stone and forgotten history. Thomas stared into the opening, unable to hide his disbelief. No one knew this existed, he whispered. But Clara knew one person had. Her father. The same man everyone believed had left her the worthless remains of an old windmill had actually left her the key to a secret protected for generations. Together, they stood at the entrance of the hidden staircase, knowing that whatever waited below had survived time itself. Clara lowered the lantern into the darkness. The light revealed only the first few feet of the underground chamber. Everything beyond remained hidden. And after all these years, the windmill was finally ready to reveal its greatest secret. Chapter 9. The hidden vault changed everything. The staircase seemed endless. Each step carried Clara deeper beneath the windmill, away from the world that had mocked her and toward a truth no one had seen for generations. The lantern in her hand flickered against the ancient stone walls, revealing carefully carved patterns identical to those hidden above. Every mark told a story of patience, protection, and a secret powerful enough to survive time itself. At the bottom of the staircase, she reached a massive iron door. For a moment, she hesitated. This was the moment her father had spent his life preparing for. With trembling fingers, Clara pressed the final symbol from his notebook into the lock. A deep mechanical sound echoed through the chamber, and the door slowly opened, releasing air that had been trapped for decades. Inside was a world frozen in time. Rows of wooden chests rested perfectly preserved beneath layers of protective cloth. Metal containers lined the walls. Ancient documents were carefully sealed away from moisture and decay. The room wasn't a forgotten basement. It was a hidden archive. Thomas stepped forward, speechless as he examined the contents. The first chest revealed stacks of old gold coins, carefully arranged and untouched. Another contained silver bars marked with historical symbols from a forgotten era. Beyond them were family heirlooms, rare artifacts, and documents that connected generations of the family to a story almost erased from history. But the greatest discovery wasn't the wealth. It was the records. Inside carefully preserved ledgers were names, dates, and agreements proving that Clara's ancestors had protected valuable resources during times of war. When entire communities lost everything, her family had secretly safeguarded wealth and important documents until peace returned. The windmill had never been a symbol of poverty. It had been a symbol of responsibility. Then Clara found a small envelope placed alone on a wooden table. Her name was written across the front in her father's handwriting. With tears forming in her eyes, she opened the letter. Inside, he explained everything. He knew her brothers would chase the obvious treasures, the land, the money, the things that could be measured. But Clara had always been different. She was the child who stayed beside him while repairing old machines. The one who listened to family stories. The one who understood that some things were valuable because of what they represented, not what they could be sold for. He had not given her the windmill because she was the least important heir. He had given it to her because she was the only one ready to carry its legacy. Clara read the final words through tears. The true inheritance was never the gold beneath the windmill. It was the trust, history, and responsibility hidden with it. Standing inside the forgotten vault, Clara finally understood her father's last gift. Everyone thought she had received nothing, but she had inherited everything that truly mattered. Chapter 10. Greed Exposed. The secret buried beneath the windmill could not remain hidden forever. Within days, the discovery became the center of attention. News spread across the region, and the same brothers who had laughed when Clara accepted the abandoned structure suddenly appeared at her doorstep demanding answers. They no longer called it worthless. They called it family property. They insisted the vault belonged to all of them, arguing that their father had been unfair and that Clara had no right to keep what was discovered beneath the windmill. The same people who had walked away from it now claimed they had always cared about its importance. But Clara was no longer the grieving daughter sitting silently in a lawyer's office. She had evidence. The original inheritance documents were examined alongside her father's authenticated instructions, and the truth became undeniable. The windmill, including everything permanently connected to it, had legally belonged to Clara from the moment her father signed the final agreement. The vault was not separate. It was part of the windmill, and the windmill was hers. The courtroom became the place where years of hidden resentment finally surfaced. Her brothers spoke of fairness, but their actions told another story. They had chosen the valuable land, the money, and the immediate rewards while dismissing the one possession that carried the family's deepest history. Clara's journey was presented clearly. She had restored what they abandoned, protected what they ignored, and uncovered what they were too impatient to understand. When the final ruling was announced, the brothers sat in silence as the reality settled over them. The inheritance they had mocked had become the greatest treasure of their family, and the sister they underestimated was the one who had earned the right to protect it. For the first time, Clara was no longer the forgotten daughter. She was the guardian of a legacy they had almost destroyed. Chapter 11. A Legacy Rebuilt. Months after the courtroom decision, Clara stood beside the windmill and watched workers carefully restore what generations had forgotten. The same structure her brothers once called useless now stood proudly against the horizon, its wooden sails turning smoothly beneath the open sky. But Clara never saw the windmill as a source of personal wealth. She saw a responsibility. Instead of selling the treasures or disappearing into a life of luxury, she chose to preserve the history hidden beneath the old stones. The underground vault was transformed into a protected exhibit, allowing visitors to witness the family's remarkable story while ensuring the artifacts survived for future generations. The restored windmill became more than a historic landmark. It became a place where people gathered to learn. Students visited to understand the region's past. Historians studied the forgotten records preserved inside the vault. Local craftsmen helped rebuild traditional structures, creating new opportunities throughout the community. A portion of the discovered wealth was used to fund scholarships, restoration projects, and programs that supported families who had once struggled in the same fields surrounding the windmill. The building that had been considered a burden became the pride of the entire region. Visitors traveled from distant places, not only because they wanted to see the hidden treasure, but because they wanted to understand the woman who protected it. They came to hear how someone who had been rejected, underestimated, and pushed aside had uncovered a legacy far greater than anyone imagined. Clara often walked through the restored rooms alone, running her fingers across the old wooden beams and remembering the days when dust covered everything and no one believed the windmill mattered. They had measured its value by appearances. She had discovered its meaning. And in preserving the windmill, Clara preserved something even more important, the lesson her father had spent his life protecting. True wealth was never just what could be owned. It was what could be honored, shared, and passed forward. Chapter 12. The Greatest Inheritance. Years later, Clara still visited the windmill whenever she needed to remember where her journey began. She would stand beneath the turning sails and listen to the same wind that once carried silence through the abandoned structure. The broken building everyone had dismissed as worthless had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of believing in something others could not see. She often thought about her father standing there before his final days, quietly protecting a secret that only patience could reveal. He had understood something her brothers never did. A fortune could be divided. Land could be measured. Gold could be counted. But character could never be inherited through a document. It had to be earned. The vault beneath the windmill had changed Clara's life in ways she never imagined. It gave her security, recognition, and the ability to transform an entire community. But the treasure itself was never what made her worthy of finding it. It was her compassion, her determination, her willingness to protect something forgotten when everyone else walked away. As the sun lowered behind the fields, painting the sky with shades of gold, Clara placed her hand against the old wooden frame of the windmill. The same place where others saw decay, she saw a reminder that the most valuable things are often hidden beneath layers of neglect and doubt. The windmill's sails turned slowly above her, carrying forward a story that had nearly been lost. A story about betrayal and forgiveness, about greed and integrity, about a daughter who was given what everyone else rejected and discovered it was the greatest gift of all. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance is not what someone leaves behind. It is what they trust you to protect.